Hey everyone, Charlie here from the Atomic Age, back for part 2 of Chernobyl. And first of all, holy crap, what a response to the first episode. I think it's been about a little over 3 weeks now. Over 30,000 views, over 700 new subscribers. We cracked 1,000, holy crap. Thank you guys so much. The response has been unreal. I have another YouTube gaming channel that I've been working on for 7 years and just never seen anything like that, so that was a cool one. And thank you for contributing to that. Before we get into today's episode, I want to go back to the comments from last time. There were a few good corrections that I kind of just want to go over here. I think it'll be useful for everyone. And if you want to skip it, feel free to seek to the time code to get started on episode 2 here. But if not, let's get into some corrections. All right, so this first correction comes here from Moritz Ernst. A small correction about my feedwater explanation. So I said that an RBMK reactor has three loops. So in a pressurized water reactor, you have 3 loops. The first loop is the primary loop. That's with the reactor water. That goes to a heat exchanger, also known as a steam generator. And that transfers heat to the second loop, which then turns that water into steam, which is then expanded through a turbine. And then that expansion of steam extracts energy out of it. And then you can spin the turbine and generate electricity. And then the third loop takes any remaining heat out of that second loop and vents that to atmosphere. And that's because you want to get your cold side as cold as possible so that you can get as much heat back into the first loop. And that's how you get more efficiency. But with RBMK reactors, it's actually more like a boiling water reactor in the West, in that the primary loop and secondary loop are combined. So the water in the primary loop in the reactor turns to steam in an RBMK, and that drives a turbine. And that's all in one loop. There's not that separation like with the pressurized water reactor in the West that has the 3 loops. And this can allow for greater efficiency. Anytime you have to exchange heat between 2 loops, you lose efficiency. And that would also explain why the feed water is so much more radioactive, because with that second turbine loop with a PWR, you would not expect it to be as radioactive as the primary loop coolant. All right, this next correction comes from Ian Borchardt, and it involves that scene with the guy who held the door open and started bleeding. And just kind of in general, how quickly people were getting burns. There's a lot to get through here, but Ian in the first part here says it could just be an incidental injury, and yeah, that's always true. It could have just been an incidental cut laceration. The gist of Ian's comment here is about localized dose versus whole body dose. There is a difference with that. Some radiation dose, maybe like perhaps beta. There's another comment regarding that I hope I find. There's a lot of comments to go through. I'm not going to get all the corrections, but beta burns, as they're called, from beta radiation, so that might show up more quickly than a whole body gamma ray dose. Tom McEwen here brings up a good point that they may have vomited from shock and fear. Very valid. Here's another comment from Orc with Vagrant about beta radiation. Forgotten factor here is beta radiation. Isn't usually a big worry, but it's the one that causes the fastest effects. Nuclear tan is specifically a beta burn effect. So beta burns. It's not something that comes to my mind at first. I work in nuclear transport, so you're always dealing with packages that have some amount of steel and metal in them, so alpha particles and beta particles are really never a concern. It's usually just gamma rays and neutrons. Marine Dalek brought up a interesting comment here that one of the nuclear physicists who helped with the cleanup effort was of the opinion the explosion was partly down to prompt criticality, and I made the mistake of saying that you get prompt criticality anytime you raise the power in a reactor, and then Mr. Langdale Paul here was kind enough to correct me. It's been a while since I've studied reactor physics. I'm not going to go through it all just because there's a lot to digest here, but feel free to pause and read at your leisure. Several comments have mentioned about that the 3.6 Roentgen was not the actual value. Yes, of course. I was trying to give you a sense of how they were seeing that 3.6 Roentgen. I've already seen the show before, so I know that the dose is much higher than that. and that, no one's going to get the kind of reactions we're seeing with just 3.6 Roentgen, and a core blowing up is not only going to give off just 3.6 Roentgen. Spent fuel is the most radioactive stuff on Earth. That's the most dangerous stuff in terms of radioactivity. All right, so now we're through the corrections, and let's get to Chernobyl Part 2.
Iodine 131. It's not military, it's uranium decay, U-235.
All right, so iodine 131, that is a common fission product when you split uranium-235. I wouldn't call it uranium decay, though. It's a fission product. When uranium decays, it doesn't turn into iodine 131. So the number after the U-235, that's the number of nucleons, so the number of protons and neutrons. So uranium-235 is 235 protons and neutrons. Iodine 131 has 131 protons and neutrons, so like just about half, so you can see where it comes from in terms of the split.
Stop, stop!
What are you doing?
These are radiation burns. Their clothes are contaminated.
Yeah, they're contaminated, so their danger is not just when they're at Chernobyl getting irradiated, it's now radioactive contamination. So their clothes are full of radioactive material, and you have to get it off, or it's just going to keep irradiating them just right there, right next to their skin. Now, people go to Pripyat, the Chernobyl exclusion zone today, as it's called, and I've seen videos of people on YouTube. You can go to this hospital, and these fire workers' clothes are still just there in the basement, and they're still very radioactive. Not as radioactive as back then. It's been over 30 years, but still very radioactive. And she's already seemingly getting some burns on her skin, as someone pointed out in the comments for the previous video. Those could be beta burns, so beta radiation. It's a type of radiation. It's where the radioactive particle is an electron. The three main types of radiation are alpha, beta, and gamma. Alpha radiation is basically a helium atom. Beta radiation is an electron, like I just said, and then gamma radiation is a photon. So same as this light, but just much more energetic. The alpha particles are very easy to shield. A piece of paper even thinner than this manual could shield an alpha particle, so can the dead skin on your body or your clothes. For beta radiation, you need a small thickness of metal, something on that order, and then for gamma rays, you need a lot, like a lot of concrete or a lot of steel, like a lot. So generally, gamma radiation is the primary concern. Sometimes you get neutron radiation, that's more of a reactor concern. But not really so much after the reactor's blown up do you have as much of a neutron concern. Maybe if in the pit of the reactor there's still some kind of a criticality chain reaction kind of going on. But generally it's just going to be a gamma radiation concern. But with this instance, yeah. So the beta particles are a problem because they can penetrate your skin. But the alpha particles are no problem unless you ingest them. That's bad. Then alphas become the worst form of radiation.
Every atom of U-235 is like a bullet, traveling at nearly the speed of light, penetrating everything in its path: woods, metal, concrete, flesh.
I remember this when I first watched this show. This analogy, I don't know what he's getting at here, because uranium-235, so uranium-235 is primarily an alpha emitter. So like I discussed earlier, a helium particle. Alpha particle has mass, so it can't go the speed of light. What does go the speed of light is a gamma ray, a photon. So a quick aside, the difference between a gamma ray and a gamma ray comes from the nucleus of an atom, whereas a photon doesn't necessarily. It's like the square rectangle thing. So a gamma ray is a photon, but a photon's not necessarily a gamma ray. So when an atom of U-235 fissions, you get fission products like we discussed earlier, iodine 131 being one of them. You get a few neutrons, around 2 to 3, and then you get some gamma rays. So the gamma rays will go the speed of light, but that happens at fission. This reactor's already blown up, so now we're talking about a radioactive decay concern, which if they're gamma rays, they're not coming from uranium-235. So if you want to say that's just that's the most accurate way you can say it in that short amount of time, I will allow that. If by saying that the U-235 is a bullet, he is also including U-235 fissioning, all the fission products, all the radioactive waste that may be giving off different radioactive particles from that initial fissioning of U-235, I can accept that. But that is not, if you are allowed to have more time, that is not the analogy I would go with to describe the danger. But I've kind of convinced myself that if you're talking to someone who knows nothing about nuclear energy and you're trying to explain the danger as concisely as possible, then yeah, okay. That might be a good way to do it, but I think it also might be more for a TV show thing. Because in real life, these kind of briefings, I think, would go probably a lot longer. You could probably get into more detail. But overall, I do not like the analogy. I will say that.
I want you to go to Chernobyl and take Professor Legasov with you.
Insert Jack Ryan joke here.
Jack, next time you get a bright idea, just put it in a memo.
Tell me how a nuclear reactor works, or I'll have one of these soldiers throw you out of the helicopter.
I love Stellan Skarsgård, and this role is perfect for it.
A neutron is,
The bullet.
yes, the bullet.
All right, so we're getting back to the bullet analogy. I did not finish what I was discussing earlier, so I'll do it now. Neutron that comes off from a fission also has mass, so it cannot go the speed of light. So that's also where that previous analogy falls apart a little bit. Only photons can go the speed of light. You have to have no mass to go the speed of light.
Take her.
Take her away from here, take, please.
Get away from them.
Oh my God.
You want to get sick? Go.
Please take her, please take her, please take her, please.
All right, so that'll be an interesting point of perhaps contention in the remaining episodes of the series. This moment included is the don't touch them. Do you want to get sick? So this isn't a virus. Once you've been irradiated, it's like standing in the sun when you get a sunburn. Once you step out of the sun, you're no longer getting sunburn. Same thing with radiation. Once you get away from the dangerous radiation, you're no longer getting irradiated. The difference is if you get contaminated. So if they get ash, like from the some kind of ash or like the carbon burning from the RBMK reactor, any of the explosive, any of the debris it gave off of that falls on your clothes or your skin, hair, anything. If it can get stuck to you, then yeah, it'll stay right there and keep sending out radiation in your immediate vicinity. But once you take the clothes off or wash that off, that danger's gone. So it's not like a virus, but I'm assuming, despite the fact that this hospital is right near Chernobyl, and you'd hope they'd have a radiation ward. I'm not sure how it works, but you'd think they'd have a specialization that would potentially expect nuclear accidents. But again, if RBMK reactors don't explode, why? But you never know. So it doesn't, based on the portrayal in the show, it doesn't seem like anyone really knows what's going on. The one nurse did identify the radiation burns, but it could also be from an abundance of caution.
What have they done?
Hey, to see inside.
I don't have to. Look, that's graphite on the roof.
So you can see they're showing like a huge blue luminescence. I think that's supposed to be Cherenkov radiation. To define that simply, that's kind of like a sonic boom for radiation in some medium, usually water. That's what gives it that blue glow with nuclear stuff. But I don't think it would be bright enough to see with the sun shining, just because the sun's so bright. Cherenkov radiation isn't really that bright per se, but it's cool looking.
Look at that glow. That's radiation ionizing the air.
Okay, they call it radiation ionizing the air, perhaps. All right, so there's a nice shot of the smoke. Actually, when the graphite burns for the reactor, it really doesn't give off much of a smoke, if any at all. This is just done for dramatic effect, but I'm definitely fine with this for dramatic effect. movies and stuff, they're supposed to be visual, dramatic pieces, so the plume of smoke is just nice to remind you that bad things are happening, and that is indeed the like the Chernobyl reactor building. You might forget if you're not familiar with that stack on the top of the building there, but perfectly fine with it, with them showing a wood fire kind of smoke.
Why did I see graphite on the roof? Graphite is only found in the core, where it's used as a neutron flux moderator. Correct?
I mean, why did the Deputy Chairman see graphite on the roof?
Have one of your men get as close to the fire as he can. Give him every bit of protection you have, but understand that even with lead shielding, it may not be enough.
And this is accurate. Just because, so lead's a good neutron lead is a good radiation shield. Now, why is this? Things like steel, to a lesser extent, lead, concrete, to get even more exotic, tungsten or depleted uranium. With the exception of concrete, lead, depleted uranium, and tungsten are all very dense. So basically, for good shielding, you just want as much stuff in between the radioactive thing and the thing you're trying to shield. You want as much stuff in between there as possible. So what does a high density give you? It gives you a lot of stuff in a small space. So you don't have to have, I don't know, some 6-foot thick thing of concrete. You can instead have a few inches of lead or uranium, for example. Those aren't hard and fast conversions. I'm just trying to give an example. Just because we have lead doesn't magically mean all radiation stops. It attenuates. So it'll get rid of some proportion of radiation, but it won't get rid of everything. You would need a lot of lead if you're going to be super close to this highly radioactive reactor. You're going to need a lot of lead to really stop a bulk majority of the radiation. And then another piece that comes into play is the timing. Maybe you don't need all that lead if you're just going to be there for a few seconds in and out. But if you're going to be there for a while, you need even more lead to stop as much radiation coming through as possible. Something about those Soviet gas mask chemical suits are very creepy looking. It's hard to kind of really see it. I've kind of been seeing cuts of the truck. Maybe we'll see a better view at some point, but it really doesn't look like there's that much lead on there. It looks like it's like some kind of lead sheet, very thin lead sheet, almost like aluminum foil. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't really put any sizable amount of lead on it because it would just be so heavy. You just really weigh down that truck and its suspension. But if you're just going in and out for this, might be worth it. Might make it too slow. I don't know. But maybe we'll get a better shot of the lead they put on here. All right, so as you can see, they're doing decontamination. So running water over it or soaping people, no different than trying to wash off, in principle, no different than trying to wash off mud or dirt or something like that. So you just want to do whatever you can to get as much of it off of you as possible. But soap is used as makes things slippery so they more easily fall off of you. So if you've ever wondered like why they're bothering to wash people who've been irradiated, it's not like if you got a sunburn, like washing it, besides from like I don't know, I guess like an antibacterial perspective, it's not going to do anything in terms of the radiation you got. It's for contamination. So you actually have like radioactive dust or debris on you that you're trying to wash off. So it's not silly. It's legit.
It's not 3 Roentgen. It's 15,000.
Comrade Shcherbina.
15,000 Roentgen. Holy crap. Let's take a look at our good old chart as per usual here. So if we use our shorthand from last time, 15,000 Roentgen is approximately 15,000 Rem, which is approximately 150 sievert, which is off this chart. This is 50 sievert right here, so 3 times the limit of this chart. Holy crap.
Please escort Comrade Kurchatov and Firemen to the local party headquarters. Thank you for your service.
Comrade.
Your excuse.
Dyatlov was in charge.
Oh, what a coward.
Dyatlov!
Boron.
Boron and sand. Though that'll create problems of its own, but I don't see any other way.
So the boron's a neutron absorber. I think I may have mentioned that last time. So if there's any kind of chain reaction going on, the thought is that that will absorb neutrons and kill the reaction. The sand, I guess, is really just to try and, I think, cool the graphite down. I'm not sure how graphite burns, how you put out a graphite fire, but I imagine it involves... I would guess that all the sand they're trying to dump on it is as just like a big thermal mass. So like the equivalent of trying to put like a block of ice on something. Maybe that's not the best analogy. Just as something like it's much colder than the graphite, so it's trying to suck some of the heat out and hopefully stop it from burning that way, get it beneath its burning temperature.
I'd prefer one of those.
So the same reason you might put cups upside down in your cupboard to keep dust from getting out of it. He's being cautious with any radioactive dust that he does not want to be inside his glass because he doesn't want to drink it, which is a very valid concern.
But I estimate at least a month before it melts through the lower concrete pad, which gives us time.
No.
All right, so why will the fuel melt? I went over this a little bit in the last episode, but I'll just reiterate. Radioactivity means heat. So the used fuel in the reactor, or what's left of it, generates a tremendous amount of heat, upwards of 15% of the reactor's total power, just from being radioactive. If you turn the reactor off, you still have to deal with, if it's a 1,000 megawatt reactor, you still have to deal with upwards of 150 megawatts of heat. So the heat never goes away. It keeps being applied. Like it's like having a space heater that never turns off or something. So it will eventually just get hot enough where it starts melting, and it will melt through most anything. And this is where the term a meltdown comes from. It's kind of become a catch-all for any kind of nuclear accident, which is not accurate. It refers specifically to the fuel not being, the spent fuel of a reactor not being cooled and melting through anything. Now, would it go on forever? No, eventually you would expect it to kind of disperse as it's melting through something and get spread out enough that it would give off more heat than it retains and eventually cool down. But I think that's actually covered in a movie called The China Syndrome, if something were to like burn all the way through the earth. Maybe that's something to look at in the future.
The uranium will melt the sand, creating a kind of lava, which will begin to melt down through the shield below.
You've made lava.
I just love I don't know if Gorbachev was actually like this, but the way the actor's playing it, where he just there's that earlier scene with the graphite where he's like, and you've deduced all this from studying a rock.
Yes, and this concern stems entirely from the description of a rock.
And this here is like, you've made lava. It's just like, given it's a very dark situation, it's amazing deadpan delivery of it almost has a comedic timing to it.
When the lava enters these tanks, it will instantly superheat and vaporize approximately 7,000 cubic meters of water, causing a significant thermal explosion.
Now, this part I have trouble with, because the lava will penetrate into the tank, but it's not all going to get in there at once. And then the penetration it came through has then created a release for pressure. So things explode because they're contained under pressure. If you light something explosive just in the open air, it'll be kind of cool fire and smoke show, but it won't be an explosion. There's no retained pressure that then finds a weakness and bursts out violently. Now, I mean, I think, yeah, it's going to be so hot that when it hits that water, it is going to flash to steam, and you probably will get some kind of, you'll get some kind of ejection. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I want to first let them state what they think is going to happen before I comment further.
How significant?
We estimate between 2 and 4 megatons.
That's where I take problem with it. 2 and 4 megatons of a steam explosion. Yeah, I don't know if this was actually legitimately thought of or not, but wow, that seems, where are you getting to that number from? I don't know, 2 to 4 megatons. That's, you have to try, like, to get that in a nuclear bomb, you know, it requires a lot of, we're jumping to nuclear bombs just to try and convey the point I'm making, that a lot of effort and direction needs to go into making something that explosive. Deliberation. Yeah, I don't see how this could ever have made that big of an explosion. I want to know if this is, did they actually think this was a credible threat, or was this showmanship? I don't know if showmanship's the right thing. Cinematic liberty taken by the show to try and convey what they're showing. Because, yeah, I'll grant you that there will likely be a steam explosion that will further spread more radioactivity. But to claim a 2 to 4 megaton explosion, I can't get behind that.
Everything within a 30-kilometer radius will be completely destroyed, including the 3 remaining reactors at Chernobyl.
It's definitely an issue from spreading more radioactive waste, but that is the issue. It's not going to be any different in principle than the initial explosion of the reactor, where you get some kind of water steam explosion. Pripyat's an eerie place. It would be a place I would like to visit one day. It's the town frozen in time. It was just left. Like no effort to tidy up, clean anything up. Why? Yeah, so an eerie snapshot of 1986 Pripyat frozen in time. I feel so terrified in this moment. You just don't know what it's gonna be like when you're going in there. Like, I don't know what kind of dangers or hazards you might have to navigate, and then just, of course, the hidden killer, the radiation. You have no idea what that's really like. You can hear the Geiger counter going on in the background. I don't know if they have, Geiger counters to actually do any kind of readings. Probably not. They're not necessarily trained for that, I wouldn't think. I forget at what point in the show, if we see the conclusion of these guys, but it was thought that this would be much worse for them, and somewhere the rumors started that these guys all died, but they all actually lived for at least some significant chunk of time after the event. Some of them may still even be alive today. Yeah, I'm actually now thinking you would not want to give them dosimeters for this very purpose, because it's just going to make you anxious. It's making me anxious here just sitting listening to it. Now, are they trying to say here that the intense radiation is making these flashlights fail? I know intense radiation can be an issue for circuit boards and computers where consistency of data is important. If you've ever had your computer crash with a blue screen, not infrequently, it may be due to the result of a cosmic particle interacting with your system memory and flipping a bit where the computer's not expecting it, and then it crashes because it doesn't know how to deal with it. But flashlights are just very simple power circuits. I'm not sure how a radiation could stop that from working, but if you have some electrical engineering knowledge or some knowledge on this subject, please let me know in the comments below. There you go, episode 2 of Chernobyl. Okay, so the first episode was really, a lot going on. Now with the second one, we've kind of come down a little bit in the excitement. Not too much, but we're starting to it's a little slower, getting to know some people, learning the stakes. But yeah, still just as great. Definitely some more blatant inaccuracies, I think, in this episode. But yeah, the 3.2 megaton thing, I'm really curious. If anyone knows, please let me know if that was a serious concern or if that was kind of a fabricated thing for the story, because I just don't see how you can come to that conclusion. But I'm open to new information on that. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please let me know if you think got anything wrong or if anything else you want to comment on further in the comments below. I read all your comments, don't necessarily respond to all of them, but I do read them all. But yeah, I will see you guys next time for part 3. This video has been a lot of fun to make. If you made it this far, it means you really care about nuclear physics, which is awesome. My aim is to educate people on nuclear matters, as I believe we're at a critical juncture in human history, and people need to be informed about nuclear topics to better guide our path to the future. If you liked what you saw, consider checking out my other content and subscribing. Hope to see you then.